Thank you very much, Prime Minister, Ministers, distinguished guests and delegates. I've been asked to talk to you a little bit about the Irish experience through the current economic crisis, and I'm happy to share my views and thoughts with you. As you know, I suppose Ireland is a very small and open economy, and it's a country that has been held up as a poster boy in terms of the success in more recent years. But like every other country, we too are suffering and have suffered significantly as a result of the current economic crisis. The European Union as a whole is taking actions that are essential to safeguard the financial stability. We are very anxious to continue with the Van Rompuy task force, and indeed the proposals from the Commission are welcome, and they are an important first step for a discussion on economic governance and indeed oversight. All Member States agree on the need for stronger preventative measures so as to prevent economic crisis developing in the future. The presentation and review of the broad macroeconomic parameters of national budgets early in the year, we believe, will be helpful in addressing this problem. However, it is important to recognise the supremacy of the national parliaments in the budgetary process. Such a presentation and review could be based on the multi-year figures included in our normal annual budgetary documentation. Additional economic measures would be considered, such as labour cost, private sector credit and current account balances. This would ensure, we believe, a more comprehensive analysis of the economy. The obvious examples, I suppose, are ourselves in Ireland, where we were completely compliant with the debt and deficit measures of the Stability and Growth Pact between 1998 and 2007, but yet the emergence of the credit crisis created this very significant problem for us, like it did for other countries. The Government will consider the EU Commission and indeed the German and other proposals and feed Ireland's view into the Council's decisions. At an overall level, the proposals make sense, but we will have to see the worked out details before adopting a final position on that. The Irish Government completely agrees that fiscal consolidation is necessary where warranted, and indeed that is why we took early and decisive action beginning in July 2008 to stabilise our own public finances. The benefits of this early and decisive action can be clearly seen in the context of recent developments. The EU Commission will be looking, as part of its normal mid-term budget review, at the extent of the consolidation measures adopted to date and whether or not additional measures are required by Member States. So I now wish to turn to, I suppose, the specifics in terms of what we have had to face in Ireland and what the success of that has been to date. The economic challenges that we face, as I said at the outset, as a small and open economy, have been very difficult for us, but I think we've been very successful in terms of returning towards economic growth. We developed a plan back in July 2008, a plan which we set about as being targeting economic recovery. It's working. The main points of that plan, firstly, was about restoring order to the public finances. We've done that through increased taxation. We've done it through a reduction in public spending. We had a very significant gap which created the deficit as a result of, I suppose, an over-reliance on the transactional taxes and taxes generally coming from our property and construction sector. We have experienced the bursting of that property bubble, which other countries have also experienced, and obviously it has put a significant dent or hole in our public finances. It's a challenge to reorient or to rework the public expenditure and indeed the services that you deliver with a much reduced tax base. We're in the process through our budgeting of reworking our method of taxation and broadening our tax base. Almost 50% of our employees in the state or throughout the state pay no tax on income. And obviously we'll have to look at that. The other fundamental aspect of our recovery plan was about repairing our banking system. We have a number of small banks, relatively small banks in Ireland, who had overexposed themselves to the property bubble and as a result of that found themselves in very significant funding difficulties. They had borrowed on the international markets and with the credit crunch found themselves on the verge of bankruptcy. The elements of our resolution of the banking crisis was first of all to put a bank guarantee in place through the support of the state. The next phase of that was stripping out of the impaired assets that had led to the difficulties in the banking crisis, and we did that through the establishment of a state entity referred to as the National Asset Management Agency, where we have see that the state will work through those assets over a 10-year period, removing those assets from the balance sheets of the banks and allowing the banks to recapitalise themselves. We've also had to put state money into the banks as part of that recapitalisation process, and that has worked well. We've seen one of the main banks now being able to source private funding for the next element, if you want, of that recapitalisation process. Third component, or the third area of our master plan for recovery, has been about regaining competitiveness and creating new jobs. And I'm taken by my colleague from Canada and the success which they have achieved in the creation of jobs, and maybe we have a little bit to learn from our neighbours across the Atlantic. Our economy is turning, and the most up-to-date forecast projected GDP growth for 2010 of 1%. Our GNP is still contracting slightly, but that's in line with expectations. Our GDP did increase by 2.7% in quarter one of 2010, the highest increase, I'm glad to report, within the EU. The Commission and the OECD projected GDP growth for Ireland of 3% next year, which again we believe will be double the EU average. The net job creation in our economy of 20,000 is projected next year, and 45,000 in 2012. That's a significant challenge for us because we had record levels of employment heretofore, and obviously challenged now by an unemployment rate of almost 12.8%. But we're working hard at resolving that, and we believe that resolving the situation in the banks to ensure that there's an adequate amount of liquidity within the economy to assist small and medium enterprises, which is the bedrock of employment in any economy, and obviously ensuring that our competitiveness is right-sized for the current economic climate that we face, and ensure that we don't allow that to get out of hand as other economies, and we did during the better years. We've also seen improved competitiveness, as I said, through a reduction in the unit labour cost of almost 3% last year. And when you set that against the EU average, it means that Ireland is the only country in the EU area in which labour unit costs are falling. And last year, that gap was almost 7%, as I said, when you set the 3% drop against the general EU average. That, we believe, will ensure that we will have a sustainable labour activation policy and create the necessary employment to deal with the jobs that we have lost in recent times. Business conditions are also improving, and we measure that against the Purchasing Managers' Indices, which through, I think, most sectors has shown an upward trajectory since January 2009, and that continues fairly well unabated, with the exception of the construction sector, which still is considerably lagging. That's understandable when you're coming, I think, out of what is and was a boom in that sector in what is a relatively small economy. Consumer confidence and spending are also improving, and we saw that begin around November, December 2009, and taking out the holiday factor, it has continued relatively well right through to April and May of this year. We've stabilised the deficit with decisive actions. The European Commission has endorsed our plan to reduce the deficit to 3% by 2014. It hasn't been easy. As a government, and I'm a member of the government party, we have had to take exceptionally tough measures in relation to spending and taxation measures. It's not easy for any government to face up to that, but I think I would share with you the very significant benefits in taking those decisive and tough actions at the earliest possible opportunity. Your electorate won't perhaps appreciate it in the immediacy of when you do it, but I think it's when you start to see growth re-emerge and you start to see unemployment and employment stabilise again that people realise that tough and decisive action is the only way to address this situation. Budgetary targets in Ireland for tax is on target and was on target up to May of this year and continues to be so. We must retain our fiscal discipline and deliver 3 billion of further adjustments in 2011. That's difficult considering what we have done to date, but we're committed to doing it. And we're looking at it across two sectors clearly. We're taking about 1 billion out of capital spending while still investing about $5.5 billion to boost the productive capacity in the crucial growth sectors. We have a further $2 billion adjustments to deal with, which will be done through a broadening of our taxation base and a reduction in public service. We're also looking at trying to ensure that we get better value for the money that we spend in our public services, and we have been relatively successful in that in recent months. We believe that we've taken the necessary actions to solve the problems in the banking system. As I said, through the State Guarantee Stabilisation Fund, the National Asset Management Agency has been established to clean up our banks' balance sheets, and the recapitalisation of banks and restructuring of the banking system is working. We also have concentrated on the reform of our regulatory system, which is a most important feature of resolving the crisis here. We cannot allow what has happened in the past to emerge in the future, and we're confident that the suite of measures we've put in place from that point of view is working and working exceptionally well. In conclusion, we believe, and the European Union believe, the Commission, the OECD and others have said that the plan for economic recovery is working well in Ireland. Positive growth, as I said, later this year, leading to employment growth next year. Confidence is returning externally and domestically, and the full implementation of the plan will restore sustainable growth, create new jobs and deliver economic prosperity. Thank you very much.